This meeting of the Reading Municipal Light Department Board of Commissioners is being recorded at RMLD's office, 230 Ash Street, Reading, Mass. For distribution to the community television stations in Reading, North Reading, Wilmington, and Linfield, as well as live streamed on RCTV and YouTube. The RMLD Board of Commissioners recognizes the importance of hearing public comment at the discretion of the chair on items on the official agenda. Once recognized by the chair, all persons addressing the board shall state their name and address prior to speaking. It is the role of the chair to maintain order in all public comment or ensuing discussion. We have no participants, as usual. And Vice Chair Pacino will serve as the board secretary for this evening's meeting.
Very good.
Dennis Kelly, welcome Dennis from Wilmington, is our representative from the Citizens Advisory Board tonight. Do you have any comments?
No.
Okay. And did Karen or Jackie McCarthy dial in or anything?
Somebody is in here.
Somebody is. For our liaisons.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press *6 to unmute.
That's me. There actually might not be anyone.
Okay, so we think there are no liaisons present.
Yeah, and if there are, they can email me any comments and I will
Sure.
share them.
Okay. Joe Carnahan is here from Finance Committee. Did you want to comment, Joe? Okay. So that works up our public. The meeting minutes. I thought we were going to do something.
Yep, you ready?
Yep.
Make a motion. Move that the Board of Commissioners approve the minutes of June 23rd, 2022 meeting on the recommendation of the General Manager and the Board Secretary.
All those in favor?
Sino, aye?
Marlene Abita, yes. I attended the CAB last week, and I'll only report that we have the same agenda and that they passed the big part unanimously for all who attended. Right, Dan? Yep. But we'll get to that. It's on rates. And here we have the Integrated Resources Division report from Greg Phipps.
Great, good evening. So a couple of quick highlights. We'll spend most of the time here in just a few moments on rates. I always try, and when we talk about different topics, we're going to talk primarily about Maple Meadows, which is a potential solar within territory solar array that we're interested in pursuing. Not only interested, we're trying to pursue. I put that in the context of as you guys know from many of the previous discussions, we're looking at load increase. Big picture, as we talked about before, our average, just to put things in perspective, our average load over the course of all hours is about 100 megawatts. Our peak load is about 165 megawatts, and our base load in the middle of the evening, in the middle of the night, in spring or fall is around 52, 53 megawatts. So just to give you guys an idea of range, the number I want you to remember is about 50 megawatts. We are actively entertaining, and it looks like the first 10 megawatts in the Upton Road, Ballardville area is going to materialize. It'll probably reach close to somewhere between 6 and 10 megawatts in 2025. They'd like to have it earlier, but that is in sequence with the timing of our substation that is currently on schedule that'll be built in that same general area. Based on this new load coming in, we're actually in the process of increasing the capacity of that substation. But I put that in the context of, we're entertaining somewhere between 10 and 30 megawatts of load growth over the next 3 to 4 years, primarily in Wilmington, so pretty sizable. A couple of discussions that we had about about 7 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, it kind of accelerated our thought process in terms of the adoption of EV fleets. So in Fordham Road, there are 3 distribution facilities there: Amazon Delivery Services, FedEx, and DHL. The Amazon one in particular has several hundred EVs slated for that site. Now they still have to get access to those EVs, et cetera. So that's not going to be a 23-24 event, but it'll probably be a 26-27 event. They need to confirm that. But that load could be anywhere from 20 to 30 plus megawatts on top of the other loads. So there's significant load growth coming in. And I laid out in the context of this first slide, slide 3, is that we really are going to focus on two elements. One, making sure our distribution network will handle it. And over the course of probably in February, Hamid will probably do a quick update in terms of what the updated layout looks like. But we're also aggressive in terms of trying to put within territory generation. And that within territory generation is a theme you've heard consistently for the past 18 months. As we talked about before, the ITC credit, which is the investment tax credit, which could be as high as 30%. As we talked about a few weeks ago, we've already submitted our first grant application in. We have another one due in early January. So we think there's opportunities to help pay for a lot of these upgrades through grant dollars, but of course it's not guaranteed, but we are actively pursuing those. I put that within territory in the context of solar PV. Right now, solar PV in our territory is just over 8 megawatts. We actually will probably by the end of the year be close to 9 megawatts. A chunk of that, roughly about 800 kW, will be new residentials that are being installed this year, which is good news. So the residential program is continuing. We view that by 2028, 2029, if we are aggressive with both the commercial as well as the residential solar, we could be in the range of 30 megawatts if we cover as many commercial industrial roofs as is practical and as many residential roofs as are reasonable. But the reason I give you that number, it's in the context of 100 megawatts, so we might be somewhere in the range of 30. As we had talked about briefly before in some of the updates, intermediate updates, there is a landfill, formerly a burning landfill known as Maple Meadow, in the southwest corner of Wilmington. So we are actively pursuing that. Again, we had another update with Mass DEP last week. They dropped off a bunch of additional documents. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to work on the environmental piece. That is not an easy site to build on. However, as usual, all the easy sites have already been built on. Solar PV over brownfield is very common in New England, very common in Massachusetts. The state is very supportive of doing that. So we also had a meeting earlier this week with Secretary Bethany Card and a couple of her team, just to kind of lay the groundwork. They are going to pass a good word on to the more senior managers at Mass DEP in terms of their general support of what we're trying to do. So that continues on. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I did want to indicate on slide 5, if we could, the economics. Given the complexity of that site, this project is about a $25 million project. That $25 million is not in the budget that we approved last time we were together. It would be a separate project, and as we get a little bit further down the road, as we think it's real, we will make that as a separate presentation. We'll be somewhere around 10 megawatts. That will be all within territory generation. And that third bullet down, or fourth bullet down there, the net cost of that would be, in terms of the cost of the megawatt hours that unit would generate, would be somewhere in the range of $75 a megawatt hour. We want to compare that to roughly $100 a megawatt hour in terms of the power all in, our total power supply. So it would already be less. And then that array would generate Class 1 certificates in Massachusetts. Those are currently trading somewhere between $30 and $35. Probably right now they're about $36, $37. But if you put all that together, the net cost to the ratepayers before any grant dollars would be less than $50 a megawatt hour, all in, which is half of what we're paying right now. So even on, if we were to pay the entire $25 million, it still is worth doing. Now, if we add to that potential grant dollars, that 30% investment tax credit, the brownfield sites might have an additional $2 million, and we're going to push for other ones. That would further reduce that by, a third less, maybe 40% less. So from an economic perspective, from using the land perspective, we're going to continue pushing on it, but it's worth doing. So I put that in the context just as a quick update. We'll provide more stuff probably in February and March, but our goal is to try and get that land resolved by the middle of...
Quick question on that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. In terms of the 25 million, would you consider borrowing that?
We have,
Yeah.
yeah, you're exactly right, Commissioner. The thought process for the 25 million or whatever the net balance works out to be after grant dollars, we would, the recommendation, at least right now, would be to borrow that or to bond it over a 20-year period.
If you do bonding, we're going to have to go to Reading Town Meeting and get approval. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Right. Not just for that, actually.
Yep.
There'll be some intermediate approvals to actually acquire the land. One of the things about the land is, well, there'll be a lot of approvals tied
Now,
to
we
it.
would own the property, though, if I understand it, right?
Yeah, the intention would be, in this particular case, the intention would be to own the property, to
So
actually acquire the
basically,
property.
you potentially, I know we have to spend money to make money, so it would basically allow more in the bottom line.
That would be true too, yes. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of economic benefits, but, you know, we look at it, you know, from the big picture. When you look at something like this, are there any, are the economics viable, and are there any major roadblocks that would prevent us from doing it? And while there are speed bumps and hurdles we have to get over, this is not a trivial project in terms of size, but also in terms of getting the permits. And there's a lot of stuff we have to do with the town of Wilmington, and the Mass DEP and the EPA. But we met with all those people, and they're all very supportive. But the rubber's got to start meeting the road right now. So I put that in the context of thinking about power supply, and that would be potentially 10 megawatts to our power supply at very good rates, and that would be in place. A typical life of an array like this is 25 years, potentially 30 years. So the update is simply, we've already started working on it. We're going to pursue it. The economics look good.
Okay.
There's more work to be done.
Okay.
We had talked about the 2023 regional winter resiliency last time.
Bob, did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Was a lease explored, or are you thinking about that? I mean, I'm sure there's multiple options out there, but
Yeah.
sounds like a 50-year or
We're
even
going to
30.
explore a lease, but the history and heritage, the plant is
Yeah.
basically abandoned. It's, we'll look at it more carefully.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was, ownership can become very, very difficult, and it's dirty, and
Right.
you might not want to own it because it's not your mess. So unless you can get state approval as a brownfield, I mean, multiple layers there. I understand that.
You're exactly right. Commissioner. That's part of the pieces that we're trying to work through in terms of, what we don't want to do, right? And we talked, it's the liability, the management of the historical liability is something that we do not want to take on as RMLD, and obviously goes back to Commissioner Pacino's comment about the town approval. So there's a lot of approvals that we need to do within here and then other people. But because it is so the Olin Superfund site is not far away from that, and that Superfund site has actually contaminated the northern part of this particular property. Because that is there, that actually might be a benefit to us as RMLD, where we can actually acquire the land without acquiring the liability. So we're trying to work through that piece. The historical liability tied to it. Anything we do to it, obviously, is going to be our responsibility, no surprise there. If there's a mechanism, so again, the key driver here is to minimize the liability, and then the other piece is, given the rough state, I won't call it totally abandoned, but it's been dormant for 20 years.
At least.
Yeah, you're right. There's a possibility we might be able to acquire that for not a lot of dollars, and actually also work with the state to create some tax benefits to. There's a bunch of different mechanisms here that we're going to try and explore. But at the end of the day, so we're going to continue moving forward on it. The winter resiliency reliability, we're going to put these notes into our next newsletter that'll go out next week. Again, the message is still clear. We are very aware of it. We stay close to it. It is driven by ISO New England. It's a regional issue. It's not an RMLD issue. If we need to do any sort of rolling blackouts, that's an if. There'll be notice ahead of time. They'll be limited to 2 hours. We have a plan laid out for that. The possibility of that happening at this point in time, given where the reserves are of oil and the availability of natural gas, are driven primarily by how cold the weather gets in January and February. Right now, the forecast is mild. Of course, the forecast can change any time. But given where we are in mid-December, we're remaining vigilant, but we're not overly concerned, but we're very aware of it. So we're going to stay on top of it and keep everybody updated. But I just, that's going to be important. That winter reliability issue, resiliency issue was in place last year, but the difference between last year and this year is the European energy situation has caused less energy to be into our storehouses for a whole bunch of reasons, although their storehouses are very full right now in terms of natural gas and oil. So I think for both Europe and for ISO New England, or the New England area, while we'll be very careful about this, we don't expect anything massive. That's the quick update on the IRD piece. I want to spend more time on the rates. Any questions on resiliency or? Oh, okay. Shall I shift just? Okay, I'm going to shift right over to rates.
Yep.
So actually, we did a little bit more work. We did this rate presentation to the Citizens Advisory Board last week. A couple of updates based on the discussion that we had. So we can go to let's go to slide.
Bye.
Let's go to slide 3. Yep. So this, at the end of the day, what's the goal and objective right behind rates? We're a not-for-profit. The rates for us are intended to cover the cost of service, right? The cost of service is a combination of power supply. Power supply includes transmission capacity, energy, and depending upon whether we're retiring certificates or selling certificates, that certificate will be a factor as well. The rate study that we did back in 2021, we basically updated it with some new assumptions, primarily on the power supply basis, and also the budget that we just passed last time around. And obviously, all that we do needs to comply with DPU in particular. We have to do all the DPU filings after we make a decision on rates. So that rate discussion in terms of goals and objectives remains very similar to what it was last year. Slide 4, the desired outcomes, very similar to what it was last year. Just as a point, I want to spend really more detailed times in terms of the numbers. But on that first bullet, the electrification, the air source heat pump program remains in place. Last year, 2021, we did we did 271 air source heat pump rebate programs. There were probably a dozen or so, or maybe a dozen and a half, we estimate, additional ones that were actually installed that didn't go through our rebate program. So just under 300. We estimate that about 1,200 furnaces are installed in our territory, all 4 towns, on an average basis. So that's a quarter, right? 25% are air source heat pumps of new furnaces being replaced. We want to continue moving that number closer to 500 and 600 over the next several years. That fulfills the climate initiatives. It's also beneficial not only to the individual ratepayers that put the system in, but it's also beneficial to the other ratepayers as well, because we're basically trying to increase kilowatt-hour sales over a relatively speaking fixed base. So air source heat pumps will move the overall infrastructure in place, but the main part of where air source heat pumps add loads is in the wintertime. And our load profile is lower. We're nowhere near capacity in the wintertime. Our capacity, or our utilization of our infrastructure, is primarily in late summer, which is July and August. So air source heat pumps are good for the people that install them, but also good for the rest of the ratepayers. So we're going to continue moving that program forward. That's the main thing that I really want to do on that particular slide 4. Slide 5, so the context. A couple of key pieces. So a lot of our customers, so our customer service receives calls from people outside of our service territory asking if they can be part of our service territory or to them. And I say, they were telling me this afternoon. So as we'd mentioned, I think back in the summertime, Commissioner Pacino mentioned it's good to be an RMLD customer. Yeah. However, we take this seriously in terms of the rates. Contextually driven a lot by the wholesale power supply, and in particular, a different set of regulations that we've talked about before. In fact, we talked about them quite a bit 2 years ago when we were working on the Policy 30. But the IOUs have a very different set of regulations that they have to go through versus the MLPs. We have the ability to do long-term contracts. And in 2023, our portfolio is 86% hedged. So we have contracts in place for 86% of our forecasted kilowatt-hour sales. I'll talk in a minute about the forecast in terms of kilowatt-hour sales. Those kilowatt hour sales, again, our mix is increasing more and more non-carbon, so we're up over $40 now. This is just energy. Remember, we talked about 100. So all in, when we add capacity and transmission, we're up around 100, or just under 100. We'll actually be at right around 100 in 2023. But the energy is $41 a megawatt hour for the energy that's under contract. That is about so in 2023, that's about 6% higher than the actuals, just for the energy piece. On the 14%, right, it doesn't seem like much in terms of the actual volume. 14% is not a lot, but those average market prices when we put this, when we put the budget together, was about $125 a megawatt hour. So it looked like 14% was probably closer to 33% we look at on a dollar basis. And I'll talk in a moment about the two variabilities tied to that. The 2020, we purposely had put in the 2023 budget. This is that third bullet from the bottom, the kilowatt hour sales. We have purposely tried to be conservative in terms of the number of kilowatt hour sales we put in. So it was basically 668, I should get the exact number. But in terms of the actual volume, I'm sorry, 686,000 megawatt hour sales. And when we put this together back in September, when we were doing the updates relative to these rates, we actually dropped that estimate for next year down to 664,000 megawatt hours, 664,000. It's about a 3.2% or a 3% lower drop. And that has implications. That basically pushed rates up higher because we're trying to make sure we cover the cost, the operating cost. And remember, operating cost is about 25%. Power supply is about 75%. And that's actually true. It's 74.26 in 2026. The proposal we're going to see in just a second here in more details is going to be just over 14% increase from actual 2022 bills. That's not a trivial number. That's a big number in terms of percentage. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. It works out to be just under $20 a month for an average residential. So we don't take that lightly. However, we are, while we are 86% hedged, we have that 14% open, and we're also trying to continue to invest in our infrastructure to build the load that we talked about in the IRD update. So our little 14.3%, yeah, please, Commissioner.
Great question.
Yeah.
So everything is relative, though, which is what you pointed out here.
Yep.
With your slide, which is extremely inappropriate. So 14% versus a 30 to 60% increase says we've been doing pretty well. As a side note, while we can't necessarily today adopt people from Eversource or National Grid, as much as we've
been thinking about it.
Has there been any more thought given to bringing any other munis into our system, or doing joint work with?
Well, I'm actually going to meet with one of the local ones between Christmas and New Year break on that exact topic.
Great.
To figure out how we can start doing stuff more together. We are the largest in the north in the NEMA territory. Taunton is equally big in the southern part. But we're unique in terms of us being literally physically connected to Wakefield and Danvers and Middleton and Peabody. I mean, it's unusual, that configuration. And then there is Groveland and Raleigh. They're just they're a little bit north, which are in one of the end of the National Grid lines up there. They're on the transmission
Islands.
Yeah, they're little pocket in there.
And don't forget Marblehead.
Well, Marblehead's a little harder to reach, but you're right. Yeah, I guess from Peabody we could reach Marblehead too. That's true. And then Ipswich is a little bit north as well. So yes, to answer that question.
Great, just wanted to test that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's and we were thinking that would be a little bit further down the road, but there's probably opportunity for us to do stuff sooner rather than later. Energy is a scale business, right? And while we're a big MLP, we're small in the fish of we're. And even if we combine all of ours, all the MLPs in Massachusetts are just under 15% of total energy sales. So it's not trivial, but it's not big. So we need scale. The other thing that I want to point out is that last bullet on 5 is we're going to wait until, so we'll walk you through the individuals, or we'll walk the audience through and walk you guys through the individual moves, but these aren't going to take place until March of 2023, not in January and not in February. And the reason why is January and February are higher, they're because of the cold weather, they're higher usage months. And a bill is driven by kilowatt hour sales or usage and the rates. So what we basically structured to minimize, rate, I won't call it quite rate shock, but bill shock, particularly when we're talking about a 14% increase, is we basically have figured out how to make that start in March rather than January or February, which I think is going to be well received by our customers. So the rates that we currently have in place right now in 2022 will continue through January. The proposal is to continue those through January and February of 2023. And of course, as you guys all know, power supply is passed through, so those will adjust depending upon where we are. Interesting note, I'll come to that a little bit later. Let's go to slide 6.
So Greg, just on your first bullet,
Yeah.
We say it's a 6% higher than 2022
Actuals.
then we come down with 2% higher on 2022, right? On the next bullet down,
Yeah.
bullet 14. So, okay, if you said, all right, I'm 6% and 2% higher, okay, I'm getting to a leap to 14. That's my concern, right?
Yeah, no, that's good question.
The 14%, we did an increase last year. Understand that the world changed,
Yeah.
and our rates to purchase energy are much more stable than IOUs. We also have pass-through and transmission, so
And capacity and energy.
and capacity, that's pass-through. Customers are already paying a higher rate there.
Yep.
To then now say 14% is the appropriate number, I think, my opinion, relative to what we have in the rate stabilization fund.
Yeah, well, good.
Yeah, I hope did
Yep.
you
Yep.
see something on that tonight? I just want to see the impact of possibly including that to, again, reduce it, because we don't know what's going to happen later on in 2023. Things could go the other way.
Yeah.
And if we implement a very high rate increase, after another rate increase, along with pass-through, it's not just 14, it's significant. You're looking at 25% possibly, or higher rate increase, a quarter, for ratepayers. So it's not a trivial amount, and
Nope.
can we work, sharpen the pencil down to, a rate increase is coming regardless, but that
Yeah.
14%, can we get it down under double digits? Is that possible?
Yeah. So I'll walk you through a couple more slides in detail. It won't be single digits. I mean, we can't, so the budget won't stand together at single digits, but I think your point is well taken, which is on that slide 5, what we're talking about. So the budget structure had basically operating costs, which is 25% of the total budget, are 16% higher budget to budget, 22 to 23. And the power supply cost is 12% higher budget to budget, 22 to 23. Now, what the customer pays, what we're looking at is what the actual bills are. So while we had forecasted, less than a 5% bill between 2020 and 2021 last year, it worked out to be in the, roughly 12 to 13%. And that was driven by factors outside of all of us, right, which everybody understands. We put this budget together based on power supply costs back in late August, early September. And since then, and that assumed basically a 12% increase. So we had last year a budget of 61 million, and we forecasted a $74 million power supply cost for 2023. Currently, that number is about $4 million less than the current forecast on the wholesale side. Remember, that 14% is sub $100 right now. The one that was 124, 125 is sub 100. So there's a variability tied to this. So I think, and what we try when we talk about rates, et cetera, what we're really trying to talk about here are what customer bills look like, because at the end of the day, that's what customers pay, right? And in fact, let's go to the next slide just for a moment. Let's go to slide 6. So on the two key variables are monthly usage and wholesale price on the open position, that 14%. Those are the two key variables. And the customer load is going up less than 1%, right? So the real variable, so in terms of from year to year, but on a month-by-month basis, I didn't pull out the slide we did back in June, but we basically laid out a slide that showed the seasonality of a customer bill. What we're trying to impress upon the customers, and so I'll walk you through all the stuff that we did and what the comparison is 2022 dollars per kilowatt hour versus, or well, cents per kilowatt hour, but dollars per kilowatt hour in 2023. We're going to end up in that range of, for the overall year, about 14%. And we'll talk about what we can do. It was a good suggestion to think about what we can do with the rate stabilization. But this is the slide that's different than the one we had before, and this is the one that actually Vivek had asked for at the previous meeting.
Yeah.
Can we do some sort of a comparison? Right, so these are comparisons of RMLD, and RMLD is roughly in the middle. So somewhere between 12 and 15% of what the other MLPs are looking at for rate increases. And what we basically normalized, and we said, look, for an 800, our average load, our average residential, about 812 kWh. So we wanted to make sure we made it apples to apples comparison. So our bill is going to be higher this year, but not crazy higher. Well, I shouldn't say not crazy. Not crazy as it is. Let me go to slide 7 real quick, and then I'll come back.
Okay, that slide we just had up is not in the package we got.
No, right, and it will. That's what we ended up. So there was a request earlier today to add some stuff. So we'll put that into the slide deck that we distribute.
It's very hard to see that up there when from here, at least for me. I don't know how others feel.
You can make it, you can punch it bigger.
So I guess there's.
Oh, if it were.
It's
Commissioner,
not
I
in the
think-
package. Not in the package at all.
No, it wasn't.
No, they added it.
Yeah.
Come around so I can see that.
Yeah.
Airdrop.
Yeah, Greg, if you could just read the numbers across the top, it would be.
So RMLD, which you'll see later on, is about, so average monthly bill at 812 kWh. So these are all 800. They're all the same usage levels. So it's 158 for RMLD. Eversource is 332. National Grid is 396, and Unitel is 419. Those are average monthly bills forecasted for 2023. Jeez. Those are big numbers for everybody. Now, for comparison, most of those on the previous slide, as we talked about a few moments ago, the announcement that National Grid made back in September is they were expecting a 64% increase. So that 396 is that's a massive increase. They went from 29 cents a kilowatt hour to 49 cents a kilowatt hour. Big numbers. And we're basically going from 17 cents a kilowatt hour up to 19 cents a kilowatt hour. And Rob, that was the question. So I'll walk into a little details. But the question you're asking, what's the delta? So there's also, Commissioner Pacino, I'm going to walk through these individual slides here. Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to give it to you right here on slide 7. Mm-hmm. So slide 7 looks like the one that's in your package, but there's actually an additional, the numbers are all the same, except the second column from the right is a new column that is actually in the detail as well, but it's on this summary slide.
And everyone should have just gotten airdrop with that presentation. If you need me to do it again, I can.
Oh, yeah, the airdrop. Good,
Right,
thanks.
So how do we go back to our present presentation?
You
So
don't
if
need
you-
to, they just added.
Oh, they just added
They
it.
just added, did you open it with?
I opened it, yes, and
It should be,
Okay.
that's it.
should be the next.
There it is. Okay, good, got it.
Yep, you get it?
Okay, so slide 7. So as we've done in the past, right, we look at the primary rate classes, the two residential classes, the commercial, the industrial, and the school. And so there's the current. So these are current. The 2022 is the current bill. It's reflecting the current, pass-through energy cost at least through the end of November. And then what the proposed bill, which would be starting in March 2023. So right across that top line on residential, you see 138, and then which is the current bill on average for 2022, and then which will continue into 2023 February and January, and then the March 2023 is when the $20. It's actually $19.85, but $20 is the assumption. So that 158 is the number that ties back to the previous slide on the RMLD column. But as we said before, that is a little bit over a 14% increase, right? Now, these percent changes are percent changes for, between February and March. So the first 2 months, like you're going to see, like in the case of the industrial time of use, they're all different numbers, and they're all because we're trying to match same stuff we do every time we do a rate study. We try and match cost relative to the rates, et cetera. But the industrial rates went up higher. They all went up last year, but in this year, the industrial one's higher, and that goes back to the comment I made at the very beginning, which is a lot of the load growth and a lot of the work that we're trying to build into the network is primarily in the industrial setting. And we'll talk more about that in the February timeframe. So the two key drivers are wholesale. Again, these are actual costs, right? These are what we forecast, and we're forecasting the actual kilowatt hour usage, and we're forecasting to the best of our ability what we think the power supply, the wholesale power supply. So we know what our total power supply is, of which we know what 86% of it is, and we're doing our best estimates in terms of what the 14% is.
So my question, so I understand what Bob was saying. So the pass-throughs will be on top of this?
No,
Okay.
these are our best estimates on pass-throughs.
Best estimates on pass-throughs?
Right.
Okay. So
Now-
there's not another cost that we could be subject to here?
No. And the other part, answering Bob's question earlier, is, again, we're doing, like all of us, right? Things can be volatile in the international energy market. And what happens in the international energy market affects here in New England. But since we have, these basically assume the budget number, which is a $74 million energy cost. And right now, the current forecast of our 2023 energy cost is closer to $70 million. So there's $4 million less that will probably be passed through. So while these look like big numbers, we ought to make decisions on these numbers here. But right now, based on what we know today, the customer bill will be a bit less. So realistic, I can give you more detailed numbers, but it'll be in the range of 12% as opposed to 14.3. But that's assuming that the wholesale market stays where it is right now. And so, but that's not what we should be making the decision upon. We should be making the decision upon what we put into the budget and what the forecasts are. So that's what we should be talking about. But
So-
what I'm saying is the pressure is actually down, Phil, not up, currently.
So the other part of the question is, with these potential costs, will there be some sort of conservation program to tell people to conserve?
Yes.
That would help this?
Yes. Yes. So actually, depending upon what we decide to do tonight, we've put together a release that will talk about all this stuff. But one of them is the suggestions in terms of things that customers can do to reduce energy usage. Because as we talked about in the previous slide, energy usage is driven primarily by kilowatt hour usage, which is usage, and then by the rates. So yes. And there's a lot more, Julie was here at the past two sessions to bring us up to speed at some of the additional communication things that we're trying to do to get the message out more.
Okay.
Outbound communications is going to be critical because historically, our bills were relatively speaking low and it was very reliable. And I won't say people didn't care about them, but they got paid.
Right.
Now that they're a little bit bigger, they're more top of mind, and particularly with the external news. So people are paying a lot more attention, which is good. And in fact, interestingly enough, the air source heat pumps that I mentioned earlier, we'll be a little bit over 300 units. But there was, in the August, September timeframe, the applications actually had fallen off a bit, partially due to supply chain pieces. But there was, since this news of these little press clippings that I had back on slide 5, and a lot of the news talking about 40 and 50 and 60% price increases. There's been a lot more inquiries in terms of air source heat pumps and how do I do rebates and how do I reduce costs. And so the actual topic that we're going to talk about at the next webinar will be on energy audits and ways to conserve. So exact same idea. So yeah, we're trying to keep consistent. At the end of the day, our focus is how do we help the customers save as much as possible, yet still make sure we cover the cost for the infrastructure and support the load growth. And load growth is good, by the way. That's a good thing, yes.
Dennis, is this where Jason Small was talking about changing the rate of depreciation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Could you explain that?
Yep. Right. So,
From 3% to 5%? Was
Right.
that his suggestion?
Well,
And he wasn't
no,
actually making
it's-
a suggestion, he
yeah.
was making a comment.
So, there's three, well, it's actually two. we had talked about 3 different ways to cover the increased cost of running RMLD. One of them is through rates, which is what we have here. The second suggestion was to change our depreciation schedule. And the third piece was to incur debt or raise bonds. And so what we had talked about before is we will end up back to Phil's original comment. When we look at the Maple Meadow project, for example, that will be a bond. I mean, there's a possibility.
Because you said you wouldn't take out a bond for operating expenses.
Correct. And in fact, we can't, bonds need to be for projects. Now, we do have a project, right? It's the substation, so we could potentially bond that one. We could. But we have the funds right now queued up to allow us to actually build that without doing bonds. And we're going to continue down that path. The depreciation schedule was a good suggestion, but the reality is, in terms of us being able to pay for the capital budget for 2023, the depreciation schedule will not help us do that. Because at the end of the day, you need cash to spend to do these investments and to pay for the operation to run. And the depreciation basically is money that has already been spent. So it's not a source of cash. That was the one thing that we didn't get into the details on last week. There's different reasons to do that, but it's not a replacement for reducing rates because it doesn't generate cash. So bottom line, it's not a source of cash. So we'll have, anyways, that's the bottom line.
Okay.
So we ended up before talking about how to pay for the infrastructure, and we'll come back to the rate stabilization because I think that's worth talking about, and we actually ran some numbers. Not only did we look at it, but also ran some numbers. So thank you for the suggestion on it. We dug deeper into it. We looked at it before, but we dug deeper. So we'll get to that in just a second. So the rates are still the proper way to fund the projects that we're doing right now today. Maple Meadow and those larger projects will be separate. And the depreciation, we will still look at that, but that's got a different purpose that will generate cash. Everybody with me so far? Yep.
Yeah, I think I can certainly understand it, Greg. For me, it's a little bit of the optics of it because we've been reading in the press about inflation being, 7 to 9% or so, and yet we've got a 14% increase. So there's a little difference between the two, and I understand where you're coming from,
Yeah.
why we have to do it, and all of that. But maybe for the rate stabilization piece, is there a way to bring it in line? And I don't know if that's a.
Well, let's jump to that right now. Does that sound good? So let's go to slide 16. It's on slide 16 in your deck as well. So we have a rate stabilization fund on our balance sheet. And it was, the target level was established based on the recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Board, which the Board of Commission approved back in 2003, and the target was $6.5 million, plus or minus $500,000. All right. The primary purpose of that was to reduce rate shock, customer rate shock, and rate stabilization under unusual events. Now, we didn't get into what the unusual events were. It's important for us to understand, so a couple things. One is if we want to use more than, so right now the balance is roughly $6.9 million. The only way we put, it's not a fund that we regularly take a portion of the rates and we keep funding it. There are specific decisions to either put money into it or take money out of it. So if we end up taking money out of it, depending upon how much we decide to take out of it, again, that's the decision for the commissioners, we would need to, at some point in time, replace it. We're in a pattern, right? If we go back and look at the budget last year and the budget this year, we're in a pattern of increasing cost. And part of the increasing cost are to fund the electrification, and part of the increasing cost are to fund the transition from traditionally inexpensive fossil fuel, I know it's higher now, I'm with you on that one, to renewable or non-carbon sources, which are in our portfolio and everybody else's portfolio are inherently more expensive. Now, we're going to do everything we can with the in-territory stuff that we talked about before with Maple Meadow. But there is a general upward pressure on rates, not just in 2023, but it'll happen in 2024, hopefully not as significant, and 2025 and 2026. Well, 2025 and 26, the current forward price curve for wholesale prices is down. It's lower than it is for 2023 and 2024. We'll see how, what happens then. But what we want to be very careful of, right, we're making a decision not only for 2023, but we're also making decisions for 24, 25, and 26. Right, you guys intimately know, and that's how we run the business. This is a long-term play, right? And we try and minimize the volatility for our customers. So, if we take dollars out of this, which we technically can do, we just need to remember at some point in time we'll need to replenish it, because one of the purposes of this stabilization is something significant happened, where if part of our non-firm energy, particularly our renewables, if one of the arrays that we're invested in gets wiped out by a tornado, and we've got to go to the wholesale market, and then and we're buying, instead of buying $60 a megawatt power, we might be buying $100 a megawatt power. So situations like that is where we probably would apply this.
Or like a nuclear plant shutting down.
Well, the nuclear plant could shut down, but in that particular case, Dave, is that those are firm contracts. So those firm contracts means that the contractor, the provider, whether it's Dominion or NextEra, needs to replace that power at same price. So that's one of the nice things about a nuclear configuration. It's not the way and again, we love hydro and we love wind and we love solar, but those are not firm energy sources for the volatility and the reasons being. So those are the places where, as our portfolio becomes more non-carbon, we need to make sure we have this in place. Again, the good news is our portfolio is not concentrated in any one individual asset, so we don't have a lot of inherent risk in our portfolio. But that was one of the reasons this was originally, as we went back and looked at all the details, that was one of the reasons why this was put in place. So while we could do it, right, I mean, we could decide tonight to take just under $1 million, and if we decided to take tonight and put on under $1 million, numbers.
Right,
I'm a numbers guy.
That's what I was hoping you had a chart.
Yep. Yeah, well, I actually didn't put it on a chart. I had to run it, but yeah. So if we basically took $1 million out, that 14.3% would be closer to 13%, not single digits.
So you mentioned the number 12, right? A wholesale, well, you think we really are at 12. So if you did 12 and 2, you're at 10%. 12, if you assumed you're not a 14% increase, realistic market prices today, you're at 12. And
yeah. So,
and you did $2 million out of the rate stabilization fund, you're at a 10% increase, which is, again, still sizable. You're not crushing the fund, but I guess.
So we could take, so here's a simpler way to think about it. So we're in the same ballpark, right?
Yeah.
So the incremental, that 4.3% above 10 is roughly about $3 million to the operating income line, roughly.
Yep.
$3 million. If we were to take $1.5 million out of the stabilization fund, right, then that 14% is closer to 12%, called 12.1, but just 12 for simple round numbers, right? So we could do that, and that's not a crazy idea, but so that would bring our balance down to $5.4 million, right? 6.9 million minus 1.5 gives us 5.4, which is not a bad number, and we could decide to do that. But if we do decide to do that, then what we need to do is to go back to the CAB, because now we're below the 6 million. Remember that 6.5 was plus or minus $500,000. So we'd have to look at the detail in terms of us going back, which I have no problem doing it, right? I'm looking to you guys, right? We're making a recommendation. But we could end up at a 12% number, which is what we should be talking about when this is obviously going to be recorded, this will be publicized. The other 2% that we talked about was the fact that currently the wholesale market is lower. So that 12% could in reality be closer to 10. But our decision tonight would be, let's assume that the wholesale price is where it is, where we put it in the budget, and make the decisions on that. So we could go from 14.3% take 1.5 million out of it and be roughly around 12.1%. I mean, there's a lot of details behind it, but that's the big picture we're talking about. And we could decide to do that. There's a process we have to do, but we could decide to do that.
The whole goal would be under a double-digit increase. I understanding that's probably not going to happen, but if you do go with what your current pricing is today, you take a risk, right? You know, and everything's about risk. And you look at the future. Say you were coming into an election year in next summer. If I was to say I wanted to stay in power, I don't think I'm going to drive gas prices up again before an election cycle. That's just me pontificating. But if I was to look at energy prices, I would say they're going to go stable, or they're going to trend downwards, hopefully, right? But that's why I think everything in our power that we could do to get it down to a lower number as we progress, because what we set now is it's a year. You know, I don't think we're going to come back in 6 months and say, oh, we were wrong, right? But if we were wrong on the upside,
We're going to go back and look at it when we do the next year budget. We're going to go back and look at the rates again. We are now on an annual cycle for rates.
Annual cycle, yes, correct. But we're not IOU. Where you're doing it every 6 months.
Correct.
Because the IOUs were 18 cents, and now they're huge,
48
right?
cents, 49 cents.
Well, yeah, correct. But at one point, it was much lower, and they jumped up. But they'll drop back down based on the market over the summer. So
well, and just keep it. So two quick points. One is, on the IOU side of the equation. Again, we're not an IOU, but just reference.
correct.
So they have a distribution charge, and then they have the energy. When I say energy, they have the energy supply, the supply charge. Their distribution charge is already 25 cents, right? And again, so we're kind of apples and oranges. A very different business that they're running. We want to grow scale, but we're not. But anyway, so this is a scale business. The second piece, what an actual customer bill will end up being next year, again, based on the trend lines for the forward price curve, it'll be in the low double digits. It'll probably, in reality, if we don't touch the rate stabilization fund, it could be in the 11 to 12% range. In terms of, because that wholesale piece is already lower. Now, anything can happen, right? There's downward pressure on it because the winter is actually forecasted to be much more, we talked about it in winter resiliency, but it's forecasted the energy use is forecasted to be much lower than it was back in the September timeframe. August, the rates were crazy. We were over, the wholesale forward price curve was over $300 a megawatt hour, right? Now we're in the high I'm in the middle $200 a megawatt hour. Those are still big numbers. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
That's okay. I appreciate that. I tend to agree with Bob. I think the rate stabilization fund was funded for exactly this purpose, to deal with transients.
Yep.
And the more we can help our customers get through this period, especially with inflation on every other item that they're buying, I think is exactly what our charter is supposed to do.
Okay.
Just as a side note, I'm looking at the annual interest on this, 6.9 million up there, and I'm going, I wish Ben were here tonight, because I'd really like to ask him, why aren't we moving that into treasury bonds, which are 4.5% yield?
Well, they are now. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they are now, but even over the last year, they went from 3 to
Yeah.
4 to
Yeah.
5, and totally predictable with the rate increases. So why don't we get more money off of this fund that we have here?
Good point.
So that's exactly one of the reasons why he's now part of the team as a finance guy. And the other element is, one of the discussions that we're starting to have with the town is, managing these different pools of money. And how we potentially in the new world, it's a very different world than it was a year or two ago, but how we manage these dollars differently.
I was part of another organization which had a number of millions of dollars sort of sitting in, excuse my, whatever, but local banks which were paying zero
or
on
0.001.
it, and we just made a hard decision to move away from local banks, which were wonderful and we love them to death and everything else, to get something significantly more for our customers.
Yep.
So.
No, well, that's another piece that we're going to pursue. Well, we're trying to set the stage to allow us to do that.
Yeah, to
but
divert the conversation. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you from the financials, you got to get every. We have over $40 million and net right now $50 million of cash, and it should be earning money. Yeah, no kidding. It should be earning money.
My seatbelt.
Question on,
UDC, right? Let's go, Phil.
in terms of also thinking of different strategies, there's not a rate design change in here, right? This is just what are the rates going to be increased on the existing designs of all the rates?
Yeah, we made adjustments in terms of cost allocations between particularly the industrials, a little bit higher on that one. But yeah, there's not a fundamental rate design. But one of the things that we talked about before, and in fact, if you look at the the comparison
Yep.
of the residential time of use to the residential flat rate, the A rate versus
Yep.
the A2 rate. And again, we didn't try and structure it this way. It is inherently less, and the increase is actually less too, because most of that power is off peak.
Right,
I
so,
think is where you're going with the comment.
well, yeah, where I'm going is it would be great to move into the world of where we're charging for when the electricity is costing us the most.
Yes.
And move there as quickly as possible.
Yep.
And the more you can do that, the more your costs are going to go down, because you're inhibiting demand at times when your electricity costs more. We're not doing that now, except for the tiny handful of
Yeah, right.
people like me who actually have a time of use meter, and then your industrials.
Yeah.
You have like 500 time of use meters out there, something
Yeah.
like that. I mean,
Yeah. Less than 500.
so, and also even within the current, although that's a tiny amount, like if you could increase the rate more during the peak part of it and less during the off-peak, it would again, even with the current small tranche of people who use this, then you would have that little effect of further inhibiting the demand at high cost times. Is there anything in here where the peak portion is going up a little more than the off-peak?
Not on these rates. However, what we had talked about early last year, and we got stuck in some implementation issue. Originally, we were going to call it an A3 rate, which was along the lines that you exactly described, higher during the peak hours, significantly higher during the peak hours.
This is the car charging rate?
Well, it was designed around car charging, but we were not limited it to car charging. So
Right, so I think we need to price it according to what it costs and not have a different rate for different types of users, because they're all going to cherry pick what's best for them. Our rates should be reflecting what our costs are to the extent possible.
Yeah.
And that really is going to help us a lot in the long run on so many levels. The more we can keep our top demand going down, then the less infrastructure you have to build, over long terms, and the less everything.
yeah.
Right?
Well, we're still going to have load growth, but the point
Right.
your
But you're
point is
gonna-
absolutely well taken, and that's why we want to get that A3 rate in place. And if people use it for charging cars, great. If they want to use it for the home,
I'm sorry,
no
it's a
problem.
second time of use rate at residential, so you'd have two residential time of use with different pricing? Is that what you're saying?
Yep, that's a possibility, yep. And your goal is, can we make that one?
Well, I mean, that's another discussion, but
Yep.
I guess I'm just thinking.
No, that's good.
We're all concerned with, we have the same concerns, and like, the design strategy is in some ways more important. It is as important.
It is as important.
And I hope as soon as possible, we can start seeing some out-of-the-box things, which I expect that we will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Good feedback. Okay, let's go back to the,
So let me just say, I actually think Dave's got a great idea, and that we should implement that. It seems more of a, longer term than what we're looking for now.
Yeah, right. It is.
Kind of in the same area with Bob and John, that, we should be using more of the stabilization fund,
okay,
as much as I hate to go down below the 6.5, because I was around when the 6.5 got
You were.
decided. And it's never been adjusted for inflation either at this point.
true.
God bless Fred Newmarket, if he's still watching. He's the one that pushed this. I think we should use maybe 1.5 of that stabilization fund to use it here. I mean, if you need to go back to CAB and discuss the CAB, so be it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so be it.
Can you explain how it has to get repaid? I don't know, I don't want to understand that part
I
of
was
it.
just going to ask that, too.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so in terms of getting it repaid, there's no in terms of filling the fund, we have to make a specific transaction to transfer funds into it. It is not automatically replenished.
Right.
Like we have a fuel reserve, which we let go up and down to try and dampen the volatility of that 14%. I mean, it does go up and down, but trying to dampen that. And then we do replenish that each month. Well, the months that we're not, that we're not taking money out of, or putting money back into it. and that's roughly around the $3 million range. This one, there is no mechanism other than a specific transaction. So back in 3 or 4 years ago, when the rates were higher and the energy costs were actually coming down at that point in time, that was the peak of the dominance of natural gas, and the least, in the low, $3 a million BTU. There were extra dollars that basically had pushed us above the 8% return. And at that point in time,
That's how it happened.
there were dollars that were put in, like $1 million in 2019, that was transferred into this fund.
Okay.
And then a year and a half ago, we actually took $1.6 million out of it to basically, we had made a commitment to the towns to keep the rates at 2.5% to 3.5% up through the end of last June. So we used $1.6 million, and that's what got us down to the $6.5 million range. So those are specific transactions in terms of what gets moved in and moved out. So the caveat is we can take $1.5 million out of it. It's not a crazy idea at all. That'll put us around 5.4. But we just need to be thinking at some point down the road, it might be 2025 or 26, when things settle down a little bit, that we actually include in the rates. Because again, all this dollars come from rates, and we're going to be very aggressive on the grants. So you guys have heard this from me for the past 6 months, and we're already doing it. So whatever we can, at some point in time, we'll make a recommendation to transfer money back in. But it probably will not happen. Well, it won't happen in 2023, and it might not happen in the current forecast in 2024. Whenever we can, we will.
And maybe an easy funding mechanism would be if you have in-generation. Right?
Yep.
And you're coming back in, a portion of the in-generation
Yep.
goes to this fund
Yep.
with the intention that
Yeah,
that's the
a
money
great
that you
idea.
use to stabilize.
Yeah.
Can I just make one comment? But John just said though too, move all that money into a different fund that's building more interest and growing on its own.
Oh,
You
yeah.
do that, and now you have multiple ways of it growing on its own, and you're not putting $1.5 million back in, hopefully you're only putting $1 million in, or
Yeah.
hopefully less.
True.
A motion?
It's regulated
Somebody?
by the
Well,
DPU.
I don't know if we need a motion. I don't know if it's just a sense,
Yeah.
because Greg's got to go back to CAB.
Okay.
I was thinking it's
Yeah.
just, don't vote on it.
Do you need a motion, Greg, to go back to CAB, or do you just,
No.
you just got the sense of what we're
I
doing?
don't need a motion to go back. So what we'll do is we'll rerun the numbers quickly, and then schedule a meeting with the CAB. So I don't need a motion, because we're not approving these rates, right? And then we can come, when we regroup again in January. So the good news is, the intention was to get these, we're trying to be a little bit ahead of the curve, right? To get these ready for March. So we actually have a little bit of a buffer, so it's no panic. We want to make the best decision for the ratepayers, all of us. So we'll rerun the numbers. We'll schedule the next meeting. I can't remember when that is off the top of my head.
18th, I think it is.
At the 18th?
And then we're the 19th.
Perfect. So we'll make the abbreviated. So you guys, the context is all there. The context is there, so we don't need a motion.
6% and 8 million. Great, thank you.
Greg, instead of going after,
I'm gonna play back just because, go ahead, John.
instead of going after solar, could you go after fusion, please?
Yeah, it's right around the corner.
Yeah, yeah.
We saw the news.
And Devon's,
Yeah, right.
You guys were there. Well, some of you guys were there, right? The fusion guys. So I think our no action item for RMLD near term on the fusion stuff, but we'll leave a little bit of room on our portfolio, 10 to 15 years down the road. That's how we left it, right? That was the feedback I gave you in the August meeting or the September meeting. But the action item I'm taking very specifically from the commissioners from this is to go back and rerun the analysis, and I will try and run 2 analyses. One is 1.5, and I'll try and run a 2.0. Well, let me say it differently. I will do a 1.5. When I say 1.5, take $1.5 million out of the rates. I won't make this action. I'll run the analysis to assume that we would use 1.5 million out of the rate stabilization fund, and readjust the rate and create a new set of proposals for 1.5 million. Is that the marching orders?
Yeah.
That's the action item.
That's my action.
so just, we're going to stick with the overall 14 and not the 12, like you had said. You're currently running at 14.
No, so I will give you the best estimate in January of what it would look like, but I think for our decision, we need to work off, well, I'm confident we need to work off of the budget that we put together for the power supply. Yes?
Can I make one request, is that you also, just with one scenario, run it backwards to see if what you need to take out to get to a 9% number?
Sure.
Whereas instead of double digits, because if you can run it one way, you can obviously run it the other way too.
It's not, the model's not that sophisticated.
Excel,
I mean,
right?
it is. It's a lot of numbers to push, but I will do that for you.
I'm not
Okay,
comfortable.
1.5 million and a 9% target.
I'm not comfortable taking out more than 1.5. I mean, I can say that right now.
You're not comfortable?
I'm not comfortable
Yeah.
taking out more than 1.5.
Why don't I just run that
I think you're
scenario?
taking too much risk.
I'm just, it's just a
Okay.
question. It's just a question to see what it would take, that's all.
Okay.
It's a puzzle.
While you're running things, can you run what it would take, what it would do to like increase just the peak part of the time of use and not do in terms of how that might impact demand and costs and things, or revenues? I know you can't predict what people will do in response, but somehow give us some sense of.
I could do some big
Yeah.
picture stuff, yeah, I could do that. So, just so you guys understand, so no problem at all, I'm happy
Yeah.
to do that, and I'm actually very interested in that. So I'm a numbers guy, so this is, fun's not, Ben and I tease each other, this is fun. I mean, it is interesting in terms of how it looks. But the model, you know, this, there's a lot of variables, as you guys can, and this is not a complaint, but I'll give you big picture stuff, but for the stuff that I actually present on the 18th and the 19th, they will be, you know, detailed numbers like specific stuff, because we're going to vote on very specific rates, and those rates are the ones that we're going to file. So I will run those at 1.5 million, and then I'll do the big picture piece as well.
And we can all attend on the 18th, right, just to hear it
Sure.
twice?
Can they?
I know we have one rep
think you
Well,
have to
no,
post
because
it.
it would be
Anyway.
another meeting.
Wouldn't
We have to post.
that would create a quorum of their
Yeah.
group.
Right,
that's
so
right.
yeah, I wouldn't.
It'd probably be two of us
recommend
anyway,
it.
yeah.
We could do a dual
You guys
meeting.
go.
You could do a dual meeting. I mean,
Do it once.
Sure.
We did get some feedback, I believe you guys got feedback that perhaps the CAB would like to continue with separate meetings and not do joint.
what we didn't, what we talked about was, like right now, we have, if we do them back to back, we have an hour. So look at tonight's topic, we couldn't do it in an hour.
Right.
And so
we didn't.
we're coming up to the end and all of a sudden 3 people are leaving and we're ending our meeting. So we said separate nights, but if we did a joint one to do all of it together, I'm sure everybody would be fine with that. It would just have to be posted because of the quorum of both groups.
So I think for right now, why don't we just stagger the two of them? We can make it, if you guys want to make it one, it'll be one decision, and we'll have to do, we've done that before. We did that last year, where we took the CAB vote first, and then we did the BOC vote.
I mean, from my point of view, the good thing about, on this topic here of being together, is there's been some great points that we didn't discuss, because we didn't talk about rate stabilization. We didn't talk about the interest. So if we were to talk about this again as a group, you know, Jason might have something, George might have something that runs off something you guys have. When we're talking about a rate increase, I think it's, the more minds together, the better.
It's a big issue, big topic. Okay, so we'll plan on the 18th. Does that work for, because the 18th scheduled for the CAB, and you guys are all here.
I was going to say maybe stick with the 19th of Thursday, but see what Bob, whose
The
schedule
18th
moves
will
on.
work better for me because I am out of the state in the 19th.
Right,
I'm
so
out
we-
of state.
Right, we
January 18th, that we're talking about?
January 18th, it's a
Yeah.
Wednesday.
That's a
What
Wednesday.
about you guys?
It's a Wednesday night.
Either?
It works better for me.
I can do it.
One quick question I probably know the answer to. I did notice another street light. A lot of the smaller accounts weren't adjusted. I'm just assuming it's not worthwhile monetarily wise.
I mean,
Yeah.
we'll probably do it next year. I mean, we're talking a couple $100,000 and
Yeah,
$100 million.
that's what I assumed. It's just not enough volume to make an impact.
It needs to be
Okay.
looked at, but not critical right now.
Okay.
Okay, so I got the action item, and so what do we decide on dates? 18th together or not?
18th good? I
18th
mean,
was good.
And then the time? We said 6?
It was a 6 o'clock stop for us, but I'm sure you can send it out to the group and match whatever.
Well,
Because you got to make sure that, I'm only speaking on my behalf, and I don't know what the other members of the
that
city.
meeting is confirmed, so I guess
Yeah.
for simplicity, if
do
the
it
commissioners
6.
here can join the 6 o'clock on the 18th meeting, that would be
Sounds fine.
easy and simple.
Is that tough for you, Bob?
Nope, I can do that
6 o'clock,
on
okay,
that Wednesday, I'm
okay.
good.
Pray for no storm.
Yeah, we can go back to John.
Yep. Right, well, there's that question too, right? That they'll, Dennis as the individual would warmly welcome a joint meeting, we'll make sure that the rest of them can.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
can't speak on everyone's behalf.
So
I
we'll-
just think there's been some great dialogue here that
Yep.
shared together would
Yep.
make it go right through.
And then the action item I have, I'm gonna run a detailed analysis at 1.5 million from rate stabilization analysis. And then I'll do a simplified 9% and I'll do a simplified peak. Okay?
Sounds good.
Great. Got it.
Good.
Okay.
No, he's been so patient. John Pelletier, our Director of IT, who none of us have met before, or
That's right.
we?
I
Yeah.
did. The next meeting. John Pelletier, the Director of IT now at RMLD.
Welcome.
I started, thank you.
Welcome.
I started just over 3 months ago. So. I'm
He's hit the
pretty-
ground running. I'll
pretty
turn it
new.
over to him, but we're glad he's here.
Pretty new. So Greg had said, can you put together some slides, and I did that. I was looking at, there's a lot more that's going on, but I'm looking at the audience and I'm saying to myself, how do I hit the high points without putting everybody to sleep kind of thing, So, on the left-hand side under IT security, really those bullet items are focused around assessment, where are we? What do I have to deal with? Where are we today? So we can't get to where we want to go if you don't know where you are today. So we're doing a lot of work on assessment, also visibility, of our traffic, of our network, of our infrastructure. That was lacking. Asset management, network monitoring, that's going to be in place. It's actually being rolled out now. As part of the overall plan to build some structure, we're just going to follow NIST 800-53. So that's the National Institute of Science and Technology. It's a recognized format to add structure to an IT environment around policies, procedures. What do you do? Make your things that you routinely do repeatable, predictable, and it's much easier to manage that way. Once you get people into that mindset that there's not overly burdensome with policies and procedures, but important things that we need to be aware of, that I need to communicate to my team and to our customers. My customers, I should say, internal customers being the different departments within RMLD primarily. We also have been taking advantage of what's offered by CISA. They're a government agency. One of their mandates is supporting critical infrastructure, which we fall under. So as a critical infrastructure provider, we get a lot of benefits from them at no cost, right? They'll do scanning for us. They sign up all kinds of alerts, vulnerability alerts. We get them probably anywhere from 2 to 5 a day. Each one of those get assessed. Do we have those vulnerable assets in our environment? And then we remediate them based on risk. So that's going on. There's a lot there. We're making a lot of progress. And it's very important and we're getting the team, my team, and the organization is getting up to speed with this kind of it's a cultural change, right? That, it's everyone's involved in security at RMLD. If you have a network account, if you're out doing your email, if you're that's the next slide, but so it's going to take some getting used to, but we'll get everybody there. The IT infrastructure, it's under kind of an umbrella of modernization. A lot of the equipment needs to be updated. We're doing it now. A lot of it hasn't. It's not no one's tripping over themselves, right, to do upgrades of equipment. It's kind of the stuff you got to do off hours, but it's critically important, right? A lot of the vulnerabilities come from applications and or operating systems, firmware that's out of date, that hasn't been patched. That's where you're exposed, right? If you keep your equipment up to date and current, you can cut your risk in half or more, right? So that's what we're going to be doing. That's what we are doing, and that's going to be the way of life at RMLD, right? So we're going to keep our stuff current. We're going to keep it up to date. It's just what has to happen. So we've also spent a lot of time on skills development for the team. I've done a gap analysis. What's our current gaps? We got to address those now, to develop the skill set that we need today. And we're also looking at the skill set around cloud, and in particular Azure. Like, do we go, when it comes time for tech refresh around expensive servers, even in our virtualized environment, do we keep it on-prem? Does it make sense to go to the cloud? What does that look like from a cost perspective, as well as security? And, if it makes sense, we're going to do it. Just like anything else that we look at, we talked about today, Greg. What's the total cost of ownership and what's the return on investment? If it makes sense, right, then we'll do it. If it's just something, we're not looking for the next shiny bauble. We're going to get out of that kind of mindset. We're not going to be building data centers in different states and doing that kind of stuff. So that was really the gist of the first slide. And the second one, I actually like this one.
Mm-hmm.
So we launched a cybersecurity training plan. It's a program for everybody, and most people have been doing it. Some need to be kind of nudged a little bit, but phishing is a very real threat. It's probably the biggest threat to us. My team can't do it alone. Even with Greg's help and the rest of the management team, we can't do it alone. We need everybody, to work as a team, to be aware and to be alert and try to help us protect the environment. This kind of training is a force multiplier. Again, we can't do it ourselves, right? We have, you can have your firewalls, your IPS, you can have your malware, your antivirus, you have all these wonderful things, right? And as that slide tells you, I believe the first bullet on the 70% containing malware were not blocked, right? So that stuff's getting through. And if you're not alert, if you're not aware, if you're not trained, and you're clicking on it, that's how problems start. There's a history here and a lot of places, right, that people, it's an innocent mistake most of the time. They're rushing. I think I know that person, or I think I know, okay, well, they're going to give me something free, or I'm going to get 10% off this. Boom, they click on it, right? Yeah. So those things happen, and we're doing what we can, to prevent that from happening. So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm optimistic. We'll get a lot of it done. There's a lot of support, from Greg and the rest of the management team. So we're going to get there, and I'm happy to be here.
It's a huge issue, the whole phishing thing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you all receive, multiple fish requests every day, and they just, half the time, they're just misspelled names of a local bank, or Fidelity is misspelled.
Yeah.
I'm going, that's not right.
Nope. And it's not the old school, you've just inherited this money, all you gotta do is send me $1,000.
Right.
It's a suitcase at the airport with your name on it, all you gotta go is pick it up. They're much more sophisticated now.
Yeah, they're much
So,
more, right.
We got a check for you.
we get a check for you, all you gotta do is send us $100 or something, right? So,
Use the IT system FTX use.
yeah. Be in the Crowbar Hotel too, right?
We have no data centers in the Bahamas.
No documentation.
Well, the way you had to pay a bill for FTX is you sent an email, and it was approved, and they sent an emoji on it.
Any questions at all, or anybody that could come to mind?
Thank you, John.
No,
All right.
but
Thank you.
thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Our GM report.
Two quick topics. So one, as John mentioned, there's a lot of emphasis right now on cybersecurity. And we're pleased with all the work that the whole IT team is doing under John's leadership, which is great. We also had talked before about physical security of our assets. And as we had talked about the last meeting, we are focused on our substations in particular, in terms of making sure that we have adequate security in the context of individuals having an interest in attacking substations. So a fair amount of work has been done already. We had an assessment that was done earlier this year on the physical security of the substations as well as our campus here. So some of the recommendations have already been implemented. We've got some more work to do. It's actually already in the 2023 budget for the first wave of it, combination of video systems and also access systems. But even besides that, we've done some very basic stuff in terms of improving the physical security, in terms of gates, et cetera, visual work around our substations. So anyways, it all said and done. We are taking proactive steps right now. We want to have the physical security in place, but also make the steps that we're doing to be a deterrent for people that want to casually have fun with.
You're looking at the North Carolina situation?
That's the prompt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's,
That's problem, and it's, so so there was a North Carolina situation, and then about 8 years ago, there was a similar situation in California. The California one was a more educated focus attacks, trying to check vulnerability. We're seeing what comes out of the North Carolina piece, but regardless, our intention is to make it more difficult for, I won't say casual, but people who are trying to cause havoc from attacking our substations. And then the other thing that Hamid and his team are looking at, the design of the new substation in Wilmington, will actually modify it to provide some additional physical barriers to address these kind of issues as well. Now when that comes online, that'll have more security than we originally had intended. But it's again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we're going to do things a little bit differently than we originally had planned. And in addition to building a little bit bigger to handle the additional loads. Those are the two main pieces that I wanted to talk about today. I'm sorry, the one main piece. The second thing is, one of the things that was on the agenda for the second half of this year was to get the customer survey in place. So we've already started that. We went through all the proper requests for quote, all of the 164, all the requirements we need to do in terms of acquiring services. So we've done that. We've got the group engaged. It happens to be the same group from Great Blue Research that did the survey 2 years ago. We met with them a week and a half ago. We walked through first round of questions. We've got the second, as of today, we've got the second round of questions. Our goal is to finalize those by the end of this month, so basically before the New Year's. The survey would actually be run during January, and then and a little bit of February. The final processing done at the end of February, and actually a presentation during the March, one of the March BOC meetings, or the March BOC meeting and CAB meeting. So that's going to be the next wave of the customer survey.
So I'm sorry, we'll see the questions in February? Or-
We can share you guys if you guys have comments in terms of questions, we'd be happy to share those with you as early as tomorrow. These are draft questions, so this is first round, so we'll be happy to share any input you guys have. Would be warmly welcome. And we're much more attentive to the questions this year than 2 years ago, much more attentive. So anyway, that's in process. So we'll be happy to share those with you tomorrow. Those are two main updates from the general manager's report. So I jump into the.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions, comments on the general manager's report, John?
Just
Yeah.
have one question. So the use of the facilities, I see where it's highlighted that it needs to be a $1 million insurance for general liability. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I would assume that would pretty much limit it to members of the town or other people being able to do that. I can't imagine anyone else having that available to name RMLD as the additional insured.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be a filter. It's just trying to be consistent with the requirements that our insurance company
I'm not
require.
disagreeing with it, I'm just saying,
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's good question. I thought you were picking up the tab of the insurance. Running light. We're not
Yeah, sure.
expecting anybody walking through the door.
Yeah, we just,
to pick up that car. I mean, the Cub
Yeah.
Scouts don't have that.
Right,
This,
exactly.
the baseball teams, if somebody wanted to use the room for another purpose, which it used to have, people used to come in and use the room, because there is no quote-unquote meeting space, right? If that's what you're referring to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
No one can afford that type of insurance. No one's gonna go to Wells Fargo and pick up $1 million for a day, for a night. That's just not gonna happen, so.
So with this policy right now, it is just being limited to town departments,
Yeah.
boards, and
Really,
committees.
it's just limited to town.
Currently.
Yeah.
Maybe we could pick up some extra revenue selling them some insurance.
It's just, there's very limited space in Reading. We mentioned this a couple of years ago. There's absolutely no place to meet anymore.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to come, the library's got very small rooms, right? There's a couple rooms that are small. Probably one of the larger rooms, but you'd have to see schedule-wise, how it would work, facilities-wise, but I don't think we want to exclude anybody from using this room. And, if you choose to use it, again, my opinion, I thought we could open it up for people to use. If they leave it a mess, then you stop, right?
I
It's not-
kind of tend to agree with that. And maybe I'm insurance averse. Do we really need to worry about?
Well, I think
Insurance.
the requirement was the insurance that we cover.
Okay.
And them requiring us, so,
To use the cafeteria or the meeting room or something?
yeah, I'll take it back and look into it a little more carefully, but the feedback I got was that this is a requirement from our insurance company. If anybody's coming in, that they have to have insurance.
Well, people come in right now. Joe's here. No, he's here. Would we insure it for him if he gets hurt?
Exactly.
Yes, we
That
are.
insurance, Joe?
I'm not,
But if it's
we're
a-
not employees.
But if it's a Cub, if it was a Cub Scout, the Cub Scout wouldn't be covered, but Joe
Yeah,
is
but the
covered.
difference is it's an RMLD meeting, as opposed to having a third party come in.
Yeah.
So I'll look into it a little more carefully. We can table this one till January, that's not a problem.
Can I just add one thing before we do?
Town,
And
you
I
know,
think the question that you guys need to determine, or we need to determine as RMLD, is if we want to keep it as is currently proposed, limited to only town departments, boards and committees, which falls within that insurance, because they all have the same
They all have it, yeah.
insurance. Or if we want to open it up to include nonprofit, civic organizations, et cetera, which would also need to have a little more work on this as well, if we want to go
I
in
think
that
if
direction.
you opened it up to nonprofits and others, they would certainly have to cover the cost of janitorial services and
Right.
having somebody here to
Yeah.
open it up and someone to lock it, so there's another hurdle there that ought to be there.
Right.
As opposed to the RMLD having to pick up any of those costs.
Yeah, but they-
Right,
you know,
'cause, yeah,
in the
so-
past, when this happened, the groups came in and they just made a mess of the
Yeah,
place.
right, I remember that.
I mean, and the parking was just crazy. You know, if you imagine them parking here and try to get one of those big trucks down behind us, that was one of the things that happened. Some of those trucks couldn't get in there because people were parking, basically blocking the road there. So that's why it was changed to just town, you know? It just changed it to town, the restrictions
Well,
on
maybe
it.
it's not so bad then.
Well, maybe what happens is if it's just town bodies, that relieves pressure on some of these other facilities.
Yeah.
That then that opens
idea.
up space, you know, for
Yeah, I mean,
the,
certainly, you know, I would certainly have no issue with, like, the FinCom wanted to meet here. They'd be more than welcome.
So why don't we run it, so why don't we leave the policy like it is proposed here, which limit it to town entities, see if that relieves some of the pressure. It's consistent, I mean, I'll just look at it, but it's consistent with the requirements that we have from an insurance perspective. We still have to do some work in terms of the security on the doors, et cetera. We haven't,
yeah.
again, we've got we've added some people, but we still have a limited maintenance team. And because we're a union shop, we got to keep things where they belong. Anyways,
Could,
it's not a private company.
could we find out, though, what it would take to open it up, though, just from a insurance perspective? Because you can walk into the library and use a room for
So,
$5 or $10.
Yeah.
You can do that, and that's just a nominal user's fee to pass through. I think we could have,
so why don't we take this for an action item? Why don't we,
Yeah.
so I will take that as an action item to research that as a second wave. But, or we can do it all in one fell swoop. We can table all of this, or we can open it up to the town right now, and then I'll take the action item to look at more. We can do either way. We can table it all, or do it in 2 steps. I'm flexible either way, whichever way you guys want to go.
That was fine.
2 steps fine.
2 steps
Yeah,
is fine.
two separate
Long as
things,
we
so-
revisit it, not
Yeah.
next year, right? You know, I'd like to.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was pet peeve of mine. I know COVID killed it, but when we couldn't use this room, I was like, well, I can't use, because the police station had the other room that a lot of people used, and it's gone. So,
So why don't we vote on this policy tonight, and then the commitment that I'll make to you guys is no later than May, ideally April, but no later than May. I'll present the second wave.
Okay,
Does that sound okay?
sounds fine.
Okay.
Okay. Ready for the motion, Madam Chair?
Sure, are you going to modify any of this
No.
Yeah, this,
as presented?
Yeah.
Okay.
Move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve Policy 13, Facilities Use, Revision 6, as presented on the recommendation of General Manager.
Second.
All those in favor?
All in favor,
Step
Mr.
aside.
COI?
Aye.
Hold on.
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for waiting, Hamid. Hamid Jafari, Director of E&O, will present procurement requests. You want to sit here?
Pick him up and take John's place.
Great, thank you so much. And I guess I'm here for the IFB 2022-45 for 15 kV, 556 kcml aerial spacer cable and covered messenger. So we sent a bid for, this is a, by the way, this is a chapter 164. That means it doesn't have to be awarded to the lowest responsive bidder. So having that in mind, the invitation or proposal went to 9 companies and only 2 responded, Arthur J. Hurley and Wesco. The award is going to go to Arthur Hurley because they gave us a fixed price. Wesco gave us $9,000 cheaper than them, but there is a price rider, and you know where it's going to go. Every 2 weeks, probably you're going to get, the addition. So we'd like to go for the fixed price, Arthur Haley. The analysis is in back of the page. You could see that how it came out to $300,000, basically $267,300 for the wires and the messenger cable, which is 1/3 of that, 1/3 of the 54,000 quantity feet for the cable, which is 18,000. It came out at 33,300. Total together is 300,600. This cable is going to go in the inventory, and actually we are ahead of the game for now. If we order the cable is going to be arriving in June time, and we got, as Greg mentioned, we got big loads that they're expecting to, they're relying on this service to be installed, and this is going to go for that board for Upton Drive, basically. So I'm asking the board to approve the $300,600 and award the bid to Arthur J. Hurley. Any questions?
Just, it's a lot of money, so what would this have cost just 2 years ago?
Oh, well, yes. Actually, I have the cable analysis down. Back in August of this year, the price was $5.20 per foot. This one actually came out at $4.95 cheaper because the quantity is higher. And the last time we had 9,000 feet, so this time we have 54,000 feet. Back in the last time for the same type cable that we went out to bid back in 2014, it came out at $2.08 a foot. But
2018.
2014.
Oh, 2014.
Yeah, it came out $2.08. As you order more quantity, definitely you're going to get better price.
Yep.
So, and this price is actually good. Now the price of the steel and everything gone up. If today we're going to go out for the same thing, I'm sure we're going to get more than $5. So
this is something you
we
only
just
order
caught it right
every...
on time.
Okay. This is something you don't order every year, like
No,
8 years
well, depending on this project that came on that they expect that we have a timetable set for that. So if the cable arrives in June, hopefully that there won't be any a delay on that. Then we already ordered the poles, so we're going to get into the construction sometime in July, August, having it ready for the customer for the 4th quarter of 2023.
This is a new building that's been built in Wilmington.
Yeah.
So the building's actually constructed, and we've been spending quite a bit of time with the engineering team and their team for the load that's coming to the site. And so this is going to be an intermediate solution to feed that site to allow 2024 to come and play. And they've given us written commitment that they are going, so they're going to write a check to us. So this will actually end up being covered.
Right.
But but for right now, it'll be an inventory till it gets here, and then it'll actually be installed, and once the poles are up.
Okay. You ready to read the motion?
Yeah, very good. Move that IFP 2022-45 for 15 kV, 556 kcmil aerial spacer cable and .052 covered messenger be awarded to Arthur J. Hurley Company, Inc. for a total of $300,600 pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 164, Paragraph 56D, on the recommendation of the General Manager.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you, John.
Ms.
All those
Pacino,
in
aye?
favor?
Pacino, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0, Erica.
Can we add a case of Hunter Orange paint to paint all the substations so no one shoots them, please?
Camouflage paint.
Camouflage.
Actually, as Greg mentioned, we've taken some serious measures. I mean, we put the staff on high alert, so there's going to be more patrol of the substations. The team, and right now, it's going around to substations. And we're going to ask police stations, police basically, and for all 3 towns to, maybe
Meet
do
with them as
more
well.
patrols, and also, so we are doing whatever, the common sense stuff, put it this way.
We can do right away.
We could do it right away. So we've had quite a few meetings
Joe,
on
bye.
that. Yeah. Also, I want to let you know, if I may add this, that, as the storms, we are in the storm season pretty much. So our inventory is good. We are strong, on the transformers, poles, and everything. So, and thank God we moved pretty quick, and thank the board for approving the bids, so we could get these transformers, whatever they had on the shelf, basically we have taken away from Bob.
Exactly.
Probably Bob is going to
Look
be
at scraps
knocking at
for
our
the
doors.
I know where the yard is, don't worry.
I'm just swiping. You didn't hear that, right? Right, but,
Borrow a transformer and a cup of coffee.
yeah.
Can we do some bartering here,
Yeah,
Bob?
that's right.
Access to this room for transformers?
150 kVA pad.
Yeah.
For 1 hour of this room?
And the other thing is that, we are, in spite of all these delays and, the COVID challenges that we've been meeting, we're finishing very strong on all the projects that we intended to do for 2022. So probably I'm going to give the report later on, so you'll see what has been done. A lot been accomplished. I just want to, thank the staff and the GM and everybody board for your cooperation, collaboration to give us that flexibility, and also
Team has been very responsive to help look at
everybody
these new
across the
loads.
board, all the management, everybody. It takes, team to get it done, and thank you all.
Okay, so our next meeting is now Wednesday, January 18th at 6. That works for everyone right here with the cab. And then we're looking at Wednesday, February 15th, 7:30, Thursday, March 16th, 7:30, Thursday, April 20th, 7:30, and Thursday, May 18th, 7:30. And we could go ahead and put June, just to find, whatever the third Thursday at 7:30 is.
Bob, are Thursdays not good for you still?
Thursdays are bad for me. Through April, Thursdays are bad. If, after April, it doesn't matter, but through April.
Let's do Wednesdays? Third Wednesday?
Sure.
That's
21st.
off in the cab schedule.
I don't know like I said, we're that Wednesday, and I don't know if anyone else.
Did you and Vivek's schedule out
Let me see what we
far?
did past
Not
that.
yet?
I can get with Kathleen next week too. And
Okay.
We can just make
We'll,
sure.
Well, do you
we'll
wanna-
revisit
But
this
we'll
then,
switch ours
but we
to
won't do
Wednesdays.
Thursday.
Yeah, we didn't go further than January.
Do you want to do a placeholder the 21st, June? That's a Wednesday.
Sure,
Just
yes.
But
Placeholder.
we
Yes.
also probably want to move the other Thursday meetings to Wednesdays.
Yes,
Through,
For-
anything through April.
for now,
would
we
be
think.
great.
Yep.
Okay, so move meetings to Wednesdays through June.
Oh, we had a Thursday, June 15th on here, but maybe Wednesday the 14th? You said the
No, I can,
21st?
Well, 14th is
after,
fine,
after
right?
April, I
The
can do
second
Thursday.
Wednesday. Either one.
I don't know
Yeah,
why.
second Wednesday, either one.
Right.
14th, earlier is better.
Okay, I understand, because you,
Thank you.
okay. Will you read the motion to go into
Yep,
executive
okay.
session?
Move that the Board of RMLD Board of Commissioners go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 164, Section 47D, exemption from public records and open meeting requirements in certain instances, to discuss the general manager's contract and strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, if any open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and return to regular session for the sole purpose of adjournment.
Hold on. The sole purpose, that means we don't vote, because we can't vote on contract negotiations in executive session. We do that in public session. We can only agree in executive session. So since we're only re-adjourning to
Discuss.
We're only
adjourn,
yeah.
then we have to vote publicly another time.
On the contract, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So it's actually
Could we,
not the final
if we
vote,
agree in the room, could we come back in here and
But
vote tonight?
can we modify this?
I don't think we're supposed to do that.
I think we're not supposed to do that.
I'd be,
Well,
I'd be
I mean,
hesitant
is
to
it,
do
was it
that.
timing? Because I mean, it's not, if it, let's just say we get this done in 5 minutes, or 5 hours.
Yeah.
But, the
Yes, they
town
go
meetings go late, they go to 11 o'clock, so I don't think
Oh, I
timing is
don't
an
think
issue.
I don't think because it goes late. I think it's because
No,
we
yeah.
haven't
Okay.
expressed with
We-
48
it is
hours that our
not in the
executive
posted
session
agenda.
is worded this
That
way.
we'd be voting on this, so the public does not know we doing
Right,
that
that's
if we come
public.
So
back.
we'd be like,
Right, they
surprise,
wouldn't
you
know
know,
that we
were
plot
in
twist
Right.
right here on RCTV. We're coming back to vote. So
Because it says we're only re-adjourning for
it's
the
the
sole
48 hour
purpose.
thing.
Okay,
That's
okay,
all.
so
Can't come
we
back.
could
Reconvening
could
to-
post a meeting and hold
So
the
now
meeting
we'll have
again.
to post a meeting 48 with 48
Which
hours
we
notice
could-
to publicly
Could
vote.
we do that virtual?
Yeah, you could do
Yeah.
that virtual next week.
Sure, that's fine.
Yes.
Let's do the 25th.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, no.
Oh, wait, did we get a second on that executive session motion?
Second?
Yeah, I heard John second it.
Right.
I clearly heard it.
Yes.
Christina, aye?
Ms. Coulter, aye.
5-0, yes. in favor.